Split Tube Media and the Cinesthesia podcast present a special daily October podcast. Hell to the king.
Jason, have you read Stephen King's books? Have you read Stephen King's books?
I guess then, yes, welcome to Hell to the King, because that's... Oh, I know what I was going to say. Welcome to Hell to the King, sure. Before we actually start talking about the Mangler, though, that's what we're talking about, is the Mangler. I wanted to give you an update on my son's relationship to spooky things and Halloween.
Please.
While my dad was visiting, we showed him his second cartoon. We've already covered on this podcast the time he watched his first cartoon.
Which was a Popeye.
It was a Popeye. Which is going to come up again later tonight.
Great.
Talking about this movie. But the second one we showed him was The Skeleton Dance.
From
1929 by Ub Iwerks for Walt Disney.
You say you're trying not to get him addicted to cartoons, Jason, but it sounds like you are trying to get him addicted to cartoons.
Well, so whether or not I was trying to, he has now pointed at the television every day and said, I watch Spooky Skulls.
It me.
I love him so much, Jason.
So he's watched it a few times, and then I always have to tell him that we're not going to just sit and watch it over and over again, and he gets very mad at me that we don't just sit and watch it over and over again.
Which is correct.
Yeah. But also, I got to do what I got to do.
Of course.
That's
what a beautiful angel.
He sat there watching it today, and Lucy was trying to talk to him, and he was just straight up zoned, ignored her. He was like... And then I was trying to talk to him, saying, okay, we're just going to watch this once, and then when it's done, it's done. And he was not responding to me at all. So then it ends.
Well, if he only gets to see it once, Jason, he can't divide his attention.
Then it ends, and he looks up and goes, again. And I'm like, sorry, we're going to stop it now. And he just goes, ah! And does his, full-on crank cry. So anyway, that's the update on my child's relationship to cartoons and Halloween.
That's really
wonderful.
I watch Spooky Skulls. But here we are. It's night 23 of this month. And I've made the command decision. I'm going to announce it right here and right now. We only have a week left. Another week of watching movies every day. The last episode's going to be a wrap-up. It's going to be a talking about.
You're a hero.
We're not gonna. You can spend your Halloween viewing time on anything you want. You can watch all of these movies on repeat in your head because you can't think about anything else. I'm gonna introduce our guest so that she feels like she has license to speak.
Do we have a guest?
Yeah.
We have a guest.
Whoa.
Joining us tonight on the 23rd of October is my good friend and Jim's new friend, Victoria Quamme Rhoden. You talked over her name.
That's fine.
My job. My job is to step on everything important.
Victoria is a filmmaker, a very good filmmaker, and she is a video producer at Harvard University. And that is definitely the scariest thing we've talked about this entire month. And she likes horror films, and she's a great person, and I'm really happy to have her on. Hi, Victoria.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this really joyous experience that has troubled me since I was probably 9 years old.
I have a childhood experience with the Mangler.
I do have a childhood experience. So I don't actually remember watching the movie. I remember that I watched the movie. I don't remember anything that happened in it. So rewatching it as an adult was a revelation.
Had you seen it between when it horrified you and now, or you would never revisit it?
No, I never revisited it. It just seemed like something to be left. But I watched the film, I went to bed, and then I had food poisoning that night. So I woke up in the middle of the night as a 9-year-old feeling like I was, going to explode. I went to the bathroom, but the door was closed, and it was very dark inside, and it was making one of those weird bathroom noises.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, this is it. I'm going to die. I think I would rather vomit in this hallway than, be consumed by whatever inanimate object has been possessed by the devil. I did end up going into the bathroom. There was no Mangler there.
I'm glad.
Things worked out, so...
I mean, I'm half glad, because if you had just fed one finger to it, you might be incredibly successful today.
I'm glad we got right into that, because I really wanted to... When I was approaching people to guest on this podcast, I gave people, like, the list of movies and told them, like, which ones were already taken and which ones we might need people for. But when I talked to Victoria, it was pretty early in the process, and she had her pick of the litter. And she came back immediately and said, I can talk about the Mangler.
I do. Everyone would want to talk about the good ones, so I would talk about the one that was probably not going to get a lot of love.
I appreciate
it. Yes, that's a great
as one who
impulse.
doesn't get a lot of love, I appreciate your instinct.
But having not even heard of the Mangler at that point in time, that you came back so fast with that as your choice, really impressed me, and it made me look forward to watching this movie.
I'm sorry.
No, it did not
I'm sorry
disappoint.
you looked forward to it, because I went into this movie, the only thing I'd ever heard about this movie, Jason, is occasionally someone references it as Stephen King Out of Control movie, right? They're like, yeah, and at some point in his career, he's just running about whatever. There's this movie where a laundry machine is murdering people. And so that's what I had in my head, but for my whole life, the last 4 years or whatever, when I've heard about it, I've assumed that it was a commercially available residential-style laundry machine, because that's what people seem to imply that it is, which that is a stupid movie, probably.
Yes.
But it's not that. It's a huge commercial machine that could legitimately murder people.
Yeah, it's a Mangler.
Yeah. Technically a mangle.
A mangle. Which they call out once in the film, and then...
One time.
His brother-in-law's like, well, we're just going to call it a
demonologist is like, it's a mangle, and then 10 minutes later is like, oh, what about the Mangler? And I'm like, you're the one who knows.
Well, doesn't Ted Levine just keep calling it a Mangler to him in that scene, too?
He does.
Yeah, he does not stop.
It's a mangle. It's a Mangler. Mangler.
It mangled a girl.
It's a mangler.
Was it a great big fat machine?
When I started watching this, my husband walked in and was like, oh, that's Buffalo Bill!
Yeah, it made me really happy.
That was delightful.
Yes.
I love seeing Ted Levine in anything.
Correct.
And seeing Ted Levine as a quasi-action hero leading man is
I don't know if that's the
so
correct read
delightful.
on this, Jason.
I'm gonna make a bold statement here.
Please.
There's a sequence at the end where his shirt is kind of ripped open, and it's a very V-neck, sweaty, bloody situation, and his hair is in his face. And I'm pretty sure that Pride and Prejudice in the United Kingdom, when they had the wet Mr. Darcy scene, they were referring to Ted Levine. They looked at him and was like, yes, this is what we want.
Yeah.
This is exactly it.
Give us this moment from the Mangler.
Yep.
Ted Levine.
Right. I don't know maybe one of y'all wants to come out and say this first, but I think this is top 5 Stephen King movies.
Yes, easily.
For me,
this is
I counted, and I think this is the 5th movie that I think just 100% lands and couldn't be. Like, there are a few that have caught us off guard and been amazing, like Graveyard Shift, but Graveyard Shift still, there are things about it that could be better, but I think this is the best possible interpretation of this film. For me, this is up with The Shining and The Dead Zone and Christine and Maximum Overdrive as being just the most of what it is that it can be and being completely fully realized.
It is completely of a, like, it achieves a certain tone, which is insane, and maintains that tone throughout in a very impressive way.
Yeah.
But let's ask Victoria, since she's revisiting this from her childhood trauma, how she found this movie.
Yeah.
So I will preface this by saying I'm a big fan of Stephen King's short stories. So I reread the short story, and the story itself is maybe 10 pages. It is very tight prose, and so I was a little concerned going in. It was a fairly faithful adaptation. They added a bunch of stuff, and quite frankly, I think they could have cut it down a little bit. This movie did not need to be 2 hours. This was a solid 125, and it would have been fantastic. But
in theory, I agree. At the same time, I can't think of anything I want cut out. But you can lay that out for us. I'll listen to the arguments.
Fair enough.
I can think of one thing I would trim out, but we can talk about that.
But I was just kind of shocked that they pulled a lot of quotes from the actual short, and they hit all of the beats, And they did a very good job, especially with the icebox scene in the middle of the film. That was that was kind of short, and it was very passive in the short story, but they made it into this weird, active, buck wild scene with the everything is happening on screen, including the weird demon tornado.
Oh my god,
was a
so
moment.
Beautiful.
That was really something. But yeah, tonally, I think they did a really good job, especially in the laundry, just kind of setting the scene and using every inch of that weird warehouse that they had access to.
The sets in this movie are such Tobe Hooper sets, right? They're grimy, and everything is so dark and wet and upsetting. It's just every inch of every space they're in is beautiful and so well put together. I love, even if this movie was like a Koyaanisqatsi of the places where they shot this movie, I would love it.
Yes.
It was beautiful and filthy and industrial. Yeah. Aside from his brother-in-law's house.
His like twinkly, delightful, hangy thing
where
house.
Like all of a sudden we're in this magical fairyland.
Yeah.
The wind chimes and...
Well, because that's what that guy is, right? He's the demonologist brother-in-law. He believes in the magical fairies.
Well, he should have done a bit more reading.
There was, oh my god, that one scene where Ted Levine, I think I wrote down a thing he says because it's funny. Oh yeah, it's just after the brother-in-law says, Sandra really loves you, in reference to Ted Levine's dead wife, and Ted Levine says, whatever, and then demands that he needs beer, and shoves his cigarette into the mouth of a hanging metal pterosaur. Yes. It's maybe the best 2 seconds of a movie I've ever seen.
And I think it's right after that, or maybe it's a different scene, but there's definitely a scene that ends similar to that, where they're walking into the house, and the brother-in-law needs something to eat.
Yeah. Is it whole wheat? Is it organic?
But the thing he asks, Ted Levine says, I have some yogurt. Do you want some yogurt? And he says, is it whole wheat? Yeah. So that's, I think, the only note I made in the whole movie, because everything else I was beautiful. Just so absorbed by the film.
Here's the thing, is that I feel like I've said this about a couple of the movies that we've watched, but I think I mean it the most about this one, and that is I want a TV show that is just these two men solving crimes together, just this like downtrodden, angry mess of a... Ted Levine never even gets his spine straight in this whole movie. He's the most downtrodden man you've ever seen. And he has a voice that sounds like a muddy boot. And he has this brother-in-law who sounds like a crispy leaf in the wind and believes in monsters. And they're like... It's like almost... I've never watched X-Files, but I think it's similar to that X-Files dichotomy, right? And if they had a show where 8 times out of 10, nothing demonological was actually happening, and then once in a while something was, I would watch it every night. It's the best. Their interactions are amazing.
I always have a dream that there's going to be some really good paranormal investigator television show for me to watch. And it
never is.
It never comes about. And like, I don't know, maybe I'll just have to make it someday. But I always think like, oh, that's going to be that, or this is going to be that. I mean, this character from the Mangler, we've referenced Lord of Illusions a few times on here, even though it's Clive Barker and not Stephen King, but Harry D'Amour.
Yes.
From that, particularly if portrayed by Scott Bakula.
Yeah.
And Alan Pangborn.
Yes.
The
sheriff is like
Castle Rock sheriff,
repeatable sheriff. Yeah,
all three of those characters could support their own show, but I want just like a interwoven dovetailing show where you're sometimes following one and sometimes following the other, and sometimes it like together. Goes through Castle Rock and sometimes it's going somewhere else, and
it's like Gotham
maybe they
PD,
don't even really
like
each other that much. Yeah. I think this is my version of what I want Castle Rock to be, and Castle Rock's just going to be about a lot of other things that aren't.
I bet it's not going to be nearly sweaty enough. The thing that's so strong about these two dudes, Jace, is that it's like Harry D'Amour ripped into two, right? Because Harry D'Amour is a hard-boiled detective who deals with monsters, but this is a resentful, angry, drunken man who gets into not one but 3 fights with his own jacket in this movie. Paired with this, like, wispy, organic, yogurt-eating demonologist who isn't very good at his job. They're so beautiful together, and they can bounce off each other the whole time. You know, it's like how you need the character to ask questions to make to make the thing sing, they can always be fighting with each other.
Yeah, one of them's always going to have a handle on something the other one doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I think it's great. And I also think, so at first that actor playing the brother-in-law bothered me a little bit.
Really?
Because, well, it was my fault. I wasn't
You hadn't figured out the
vibing to
movies.
what the movie was doing. Because go ahead.
This is the only, despite the fact that we're watching 40 movies this month, I watched this one twice. I watched the movie and immediately restarted it. Because I loved it so much.
If I hadn't been in a position where I was gonna have to, like, get up in 4 hours to a hungry 1-year-old, I probably would have done the same thing, because this movie was stunning to me.
Yeah.
Mainly just that it existed in the purity that it did, that nobody, came in and made Tobe Hooper stop it.
Yes.
Because that is what you expect to happen with something like this.
Someone would see the old man makeup they're putting on Robert Englund and be like, oh no. Oh, that's not what we asked for at all.
Can we talk about Robert Englund's character?
Please.
Because I have some questions. I appreciate his scenery chewing. I appreciate that he says things like, Raleigh, I didn't like that old bitch. I don't know that I needed the subplot about him, like, trying to get with
predator?
It wasn't even that he was a second, like, that young woman seemed to want to be, I wasn't sure if she wanted it or not. It was very weird.
She definitely
submits
willingly,
I think
she
saw somebody get murdered and then was like, well, this is maybe not the optimal time, but I guess I'll take off my sweater and I'll let you see me in this tank top.
At that point, hasn't she already been bitten by the machine?
Yeah, so that's why he brought her up.
She has the demon in her at that point, and I think that's what's making her sort of, she sees this, or doesn't understand it, but feels this connection to the...
This is one of the things that I could have happily removed from the film and not had
for sure.
And had it be very comfortable.
I think that's probably correct.
I get wanting to murder all the 16-year-old virgins. Great, wonderful. Also, it gave us the opportunity to have the brother-in-law just kind of scream, "Are you a virgin?" Which is fantastic.
Yes. What's wrong with you?
Are you a pervert? It doesn't matter if I'm a pervert.
Oh, it's perfect. You know what? Live your truth. That's great.
Yeah. It is irrelevant if I am a pervert.
No, I could see eliminating that. To me, it was so murky that it didn't set off my, like, I just wasn't really thinking along those lines, but I could totally see just kind of getting rid of a little bit of that in there, or like trimming that somehow. What I wouldn't want to lose is that character's conversion into full-on insane demon lady later.
Yeah,
sure.
Because she's super fun.
Yeah.
So I'd want to find some way to get from A to B without
the
because it isn't necessary.
The only bummer about that, and maybe there would be a way to work this in, maybe I'm just nitpicking, the only bummer about removing that plotline would be losing Robert Englund saying, "The only thing worse than a devil within is the devil without," and pulling his sunglasses. It's really upsetting and dirty.
You could just make that the first shot of the film.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
just a tone setter that was not. So do we? Who does anybody want to just give a quick pitch to the audience as to what this movie even is?
All right, hi audience. So the Mangler. The Mangler is set. Do we even have a state for where this is set, or is it just?
It is in Maine.
New England. Okay, is it Maine? All right.
Mm-hmm.
So
they say what town it is, but I don't remember. It's the industrial heart of Maine.
Right. It's something falls or river. It doesn't really matter. But basically, it's one of your
something falls.
Your spooky Stephen King town, in which there is an industrial laundry overseen by Robert Englund, whose name within the film I can't remember because it's not really important. He's a giant jerk. He's overseeing this laundry. He's overworking employees.
He's also an old man with metal legs.
Sure, he does have metal legs and wears sunglasses indoors to cover his spooky blue blind eyes. Yes, it's very strange. So his niece is working in this laundry and cuts her hand on this very large mangle or laundry press. And at the same time, a large refrigerator is almost dropped on her, and there are weird blue sparks, which is where we get the idea that something is going wrong. You've got Ted Levine as the downtrodden cop who's just having a bad day, and he gets called into a case where...
He has a bad day every day.
He does not seem to have a joyous life. It may be about his dead wife. It may just be he's trying to, like, get to his pension and get out of this town.
Yeah.
That's fine. We've all been there. So he gets called into this case in this laundry where an old woman has been pulled into the laundry press, and everybody vomits because seeing a woman folded up like laundry is gross.
Yeah. She's legitimately pressed and folded like laundry.
They put her in they take her out in a basket.
It's truly grimy.
It's kind of amazing. There's a beautiful sequence with the flashbulb, and you kind of see what's happening, and I appreciate that when they get into the special effects.
Sorry,
a
flashbulb in the camera of JJJ Pictureman.
Triple J. We will just call him Triple J. Like a radio station.
Who's also a young man in an old man makeup.
He plays another character, too.
Yeah, he plays the mortician.
Yeah.
Oh, the mortician.
Which, there's a scene where he talks to Ted Levine. The only scene the mortician's in, he walks out, and then immediately Pictureman walks in and scares Ted Levine. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
After offering him a cherry tomato.
I mean, that's what I want to eat when I'm reassembling a laundry press corpse.
Next to a gross body, yeah.
Yummy.
So was this just a standard industrial accident? Was some safety?
Surely it's just a safety
measure
not, no.
And OSHA is called in.
But the safety commission comes in. They can't find anything wrong. What will we do?
That seems suspicious.
Ted Levine thinks that there might be something afoot here, so he checks in with his brother-in-law, who says, well, have you considered the laundry press, also called a mangle, which we will not mention again for the rest of the film, might be possessed?
His brother-in-law, it's worth noting, is a demonologist, and this is probably his answer to everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's probably not the first time he suggested that a thing might be possessed.
Yeah, oh, my toast is burnt. My toaster's possessed.
My cat is acting a little funny. Have you considered possession? Has your cat
are just a force like electricity.
Has your cat had the blood of a virgin? That's the most popular one. It's usually the virgins. I'm not a pervert. Don't ask about that. They have a chat, and Ted Levine is not convinced. What happens next in the sequence? I feel like somebody else.
That is hard to remember.
You're going in way more detail than I think we've ever even tried to before.
Right. So he decides.
They start to examine, and then someone else
we
gets
should
killed.
probably stop you for your just for your sake.
Detail.
No. Everything was great. I just don't want you know.
And another person dies, and then they investigate, and then they go talk to the 16-year-old, and she says something about how the refrigerator bumped the machine, and Ted Levine's like, oh, it was a short. After walking in and seeing a case full of weird dolls and being legitimately delighted. It's the only time he shows his joy in the whole movie.
Oh, your dolls are lovely!
This case of weird dolls, yeah.
That's fine.
And so he's like, oh, it's definitely a short. But that's when the brother's like, are you a virgin? And the girl's like, get out of my house! So they're both convinced they're correct.
Right. And then they're driving home, and they see that there's a police area cordoned off, and they find that the refrigerator, the truck had almost crashed into Ted Levine, and then this after it was removed from this laundry, after almost crushing, I want to say it's Sherry. So it's sitting in this front lawn after it had been deposited there, and oh no, a little boy has been trapped inside.
What?
He is very dead. Then, as soon as the boy is taken away by the ambulance with his wailing mother, looks inside, there's some dead birds, and then it tries to eat his brother-in-law. And one alive bird. That
were presumably in there with the dead kid?
I'm not sure if they didn't notice the birds or like what, So the brother-in-law reaches in, and then all of a sudden this refrigerator tries to eat him, and then Ted Levine goes buck wild and starts hammering it, and all of a sudden there's a demon tornado. So,
Can I pause you? That's the power of Ted Levine's character in this movie, is that he has no interest in the demon theory. He doesn't believe there are demons involved, but he does know that this is the refrigerator that bumped into Sherry when she hurt her hand, and that it has hurt his brother-in-law. And he, as a reaction to that, as a man who does not believe that demons are involved, screams, punches it, finds a hammer, and then smashes it until it explodes.
I mean, this is why we take doors off of
Ted
refrigerators.
Levine's character.
This is why we take the doors off white goods.
Yeah.
There's so many violations here. There's so many problems.
Yeah, OSHA.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of OSHA violations. So anyway, there's probably a demon. Oh shit. Go to the morgue. We see the reassembled body. He grabs more of these antacid pills become important later.
Oh, which he gets from the old lady who was eaten by the machine.
He steals them from the old lady who has dropped them in this machine.
Yes.
All right, so very long story short, we go back to the laundry where the foreman is starting to think, maybe there is something bad about this machine. Maybe we shouldn't have a death machine on the floor. So
that foreman also, what a delight. He's a drunk old man, late middle-aged man who has white paint brushed into his hair because he is made old like a theatrical person, and has a bright red nose because he is a drunk, and just yells everything he says, and he's great.
He's doing his best,
George.
Somebody
He's
had to do
awesome.
their best in this movie, and within the plot of the movie, and he is one of the people who's doing his best. Unfortunately, that means he has to die. He gets ripped apart. Sherry is very unsettled by this. Sherry gets sent back to the house, and then her uncle and the young woman that he's with are, doing their demonic rituals or whatever. At some point, we find out that this whole town, anyone who's missing a limb has, sacrificed, usually their 16-year-old virgin daughter, because it's always daughters. I don't say anything about any sons here. That. Those virgin girl children.
It's a movie about capitalism being evil and the patriarchy using the bodies of young women for gain.
Yum, yum, yum. So, anyway, they're doing these rituals. Ted Levine is like, oh no, Sherry, how old is she? She's 16 tonight.
It's her birthday today.
What? So he goes to get her, but alas, her uncle has taken her to feed her to the Mangler. There's a very big showdown between the girlfriend and the uncle and Sherry and Ted Levine. Unfortunately, and the Mangler, who is tired of Robert Englund and is ready for him to get folded up, and so that's what happened. It just reaches out with its little metal arm and rips him up, and there we are.
A bravura scene of Robert Englund being eaten.
It was very good. That was a beautifully done scene.
In which he prays Our Father who art in heaven, but to the devil.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ted Levine just shakes his head. Oh, terrible. So they do a little ritual.
He's too bedraggled to feel anything else.
Well, also that
a long wet day.
And that was his favorite sparring coat.
That's true.
Rest in peace. So they do a little ritual. They spray some holy water, and a lot is made of these antacid pills because the one thing that would change the ritual is Hand of Glory, also known as belladonna, which is in these pills that got eaten with the Mangler. And so that just hisses it off, and it means it could eat a stack of Bible. And so the Mangler comes animate, rips itself from the floor, grows hands, and starts just ripping everything apart. It eats the brother-in-law. Sherry and Ted Levine jump into the sewer and somehow escape. They go to the hospital where Sherry is taken away and has a bandage on her hand. Ted Levine is sad, and then he goes to visit Sherry, who, oh no, has taken over the factory and is missing a finger and has weird metal braces on her legs.
Oh no!
Ted Levine throws the flowers he has brought her into a bin and walks off looking dejected.
To go do more cases.
At this point, he's been fired from his job, so I imagine he's going to go be a cop somewhere else because at this point, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
I think he's just driving out of town because for your TV show to work, Jim, we have to bring the brother-in-law back. Although maybe he could just be a ghost, like the hologram in Quantum Leap.
That.
Yeah,
fine with that.
Perfect.
Yeah, Ted Levine's going to drive and move to Castle Rock.
Yeah.
And then he's going to be wandering around solving crimes with his ghost brother-in-law, and Alan Pangborn's going to be wandering around being like, who's this guy who just came into town?
I love that because then Ted Levine has a ghost sidekick but still doesn't believe in supernatural things.
Yeah.
Even though he interacts with one consistently.
Yeah.
I just want them to go to Florida. I just want them to not be in New England, because then at least you'll get rid of the weird, spooky New England, crucible stuff that's happening.
Everyone from Maine goes to Florida for the winter, so they would still have to deal with it for 4 months a year.
Damn it.
All the vampires would fly down there.
It's true. We've also established pretty well through all of these movies that if people from Maine go somewhere else, they just bring shit.
They bring it with them. Do you think that
to Colorado
Stephen King's
and
whole career
Iowa
has affected the whole country's perception of what Maine is over the last 40 years?
I don't think it's an inaccurate perception.
I mean, because here's the thing: he's in a long. He may have affected specifically Maine. I think that's probably true. Maine has a certain but Maine was already part of New England, and so I think maybe Maine took on a little bit of an extra King shine, but King's operating in a very long tradition of horror fiction set and coming out of New England, Hawthorne, Lovecraft.
But most of the rest of that is all specifically Massachusetts, isn't it?
No. Lovecraft is Providence. Hawthorne's all over the place.
New England is known for being weird and insular and full of demons in possession. That's what we do.
But I do think he's now the main
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
So if Hawthorne is in Massachusetts and Lovecraft is in Rhode Island, King is in Maine. And so,
Sure.
he's part of that constellation.
I should become the New Hampshire guy.
Obviously.
I should learn how to write prose.
So this movie, as we just heard, has a lot of plot. And it goes all over the place. I don't even know where I want to start talking about this.
Victoria, you've read the story.
Yes.
Which I have not, but I did a little research because I couldn't stop thinking about this. And from what I could tell, so in the movie, this might be, I don't know, Jason, if you've done more research than me, you probably have. You're a prepared human.
On this one? Probably not.
Okay, great.
It sounds like.
So in the movie, this is a thing that has been a haunted thing for hundreds of years. But from what I gather in the short story, it is haunted because over the course of the story, a series of accidents happen that simulate a demonic summoning.
Right. There is no
Yeah.
spooky New England town. There is no people actively feeding into it. It's accident. There's blood.
It's like
you get blood of a virgin.
Accidentally
you get
a bat
blood.
flies in.
Right.
Accidentally they put in something with like Jello that has horse hooves.
Right. Then you get the hand
Accidentally
of glory.
some cemetery dirt gets in there.
Right.
So which is a super hilarious short story, and I love that. But that's not in this movie. In this movie, it's been haunted for a long time. But I think that for the long form shape of the movie, I think it's smart. Because I think that lets them bring in this sort of old money capitalism critique thing, which is very Tobe Hooper, and also very Stephen King. I think it's at least very Graveyard Shift, and it's so smart, I think, and is great.
But
I was going
to say this
all
is
of
another...
Tobe Hooper's movies are like, I hate the man,
Yeah.
which is
part
of
definitely.
why I love them.
Well, and it meshes well with, as I was going to point out, the like terrible working conditions, pro labor. And when this film first started, I almost thought like, is this going to just be Graveyard Shift Redux, but not necessarily as lovely? Because
there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah, because there's like a tyrannical foreman, and there's people in terrible working conditions, and there's some kind of monster lurking, and it's very similar. But obviously, this became 100% its own thing.
Yeah.
Although it's also worth mentioning for this film's reputation as like, King gets out of control. At a certain point, he's writing about a laundry machine.
Yeah.
This is from the same book as all of the rest of the movies that we've talked about.
Oh, is that true?
Short stories.
This is 1972. He is not doing cocaine
his
yet.
first short story book.
Oh, wow. It's also, it's not weirder than, for example, Christine, right? It's just another movie where a demon gets inside an object.
Exactly.
Which,
and Christine came
which is
way
a
later.
thing he explores several times, and I think it's a good, I don't know, I think it's a worthwhile thing to talk about.
But like Children of the Corn,
Jason,
Lawnmower Man, all of those stories are from one book.
I think that I like that you included Lawnmower Man. Everyone thinks. I always assumed from hearing about it is that it's like a home washer, like a washer dryer unit.
Yeah, sure. You get that Family Guy joke, like a lamp monster. Boo.
Yeah, exactly. And when people present it that way, you're like, oh, it sounds dumb. It sounds like he's just phoning it in.
Totally.
But that's not what it is, even a little bit. But Jason, that does, I think, get back to what you were asking about the Belladonna, the Hand of Glory, where it's in the story. I think it's more significant because this thing has been accidentally summoned over the course of a month, where a series of accidents cause a demon to occur, and they assume going into trying to exorcise it that it can't have eaten any belladonna because that doesn't grow nearby, but these pills contain it, and so it's actually a much more powerful demon than they could have guessed, and they're fully unprepared.
Okay.
And in the movie, that's a little bit shoehorned in, and I think that's probably what you're feeling about. It is. I mean, it's. Is that what you were? 'Cause you were saying you were having trouble tracking the pills, and it's the way they play them at the beginning. And I think this is a clever way to introduce them. Relatively, is that the first woman, Gorley, Edith, whatever her name is, that Frawley, that falls in at first. She drops several of her precious antacids onto the belt, and she's trying to grab them, and that's how she gets sucked in. So they're played as just being sort of important in that moment, but then later the monster has eaten a half a dozen of the belladonna pills.
I think it's good that he keeps eating them throughout the film, just because otherwise it would feel very weird. Otherwise,
I guess what I didn't have was an understanding that this was a real thing.
Oh, like an antacid with belladonna in it?
Yeah.
So that's a Stephen King contrivance.
I feel like it's normally like heart pills.
I'm looking it up right now, and it's a natural alkaloid. So I think it is.
So it could be.
I think
It
there is a
wouldn't
medicinal
be, but
use.
it could be. That might be another thing that maybe happened in the 1950s, but doesn't happen anymore. Because now they would just be made of baking soda or whatever, right? It's
Right,
whatever
exactly.
is incredibly cheap and alkaline.
So that was what I was confused about, because it seemed like, because it was this like rare, weird, mystical root, that somehow it being in the pills had to be significant in some way, and it didn't occur to me that it was just supposed to be these are normal antacids that happen to have it in it.
I
Didn't even occur to me that was what I was supposed to be gleaning from that.
Yeah.
I thought it was something far more sinister of like, it started me thinking of like, well, why did the woman have that in
Belladonna
the pills?
pills. Right,
was she
right.
like in on it, or is there something I'm supposed to be getting from
I
this?
see.
And I didn't realize it was just supposed to be like, oh yeah, belladonna, sometimes that's used in stuff.
You were just digging too deep.
Yeah. But it 100% is still just like a thing that you can buy as a dietary supplement.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm sure that what happened was he just saw some antacids once and noticed that and knew, because he's a real big nerd,
Yeah.
that, that is featured in a lot of folklore. And so he was like, oh, that would be funny if that somehow worked its way into something somewhere. And then that, just popped out of his head when he wrote the story in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, which is not to denigrate the story. That's just how fast he used to write.
I loved I think I agree with you, Victoria, that it's important that he's sort of eating them through the whole movie, and then he steals them from that woman's purse, because it sort of keeps them in your mind the whole movie, and also reinforces that he's a dirtbag and like just can't survive. But I also, if I were making the TV show, he would never stop eating antacids. I think that's such a charm.
Oh yeah, he would be chomping them the whole time.
But the other, I know I already mentioned this once, but I want to go back to it because I am obsessed with it. But there's the first time Ted Levine goes in and sits on the machine and it bites his jacket, and then he fires 10 bullets through his jacket to get free. And then 10 minutes later in the movie, he accidentally shuts his coat in the car door and throws himself against a wall and screams obscenities and yanks it out of the door and freaks out. And I understand that it's a throwback to when he sort of got it caught in the machine, but it's also just such a relatable moment. I feel like the way he reacts to things I really identify with. He just screams and then goes and talks to his brother-in-law while drinking milk out of a glass vase. And then just before they go in for the final showdown, they're talking outside the car, and he literally punches his own jacket off of his own arms to get it off his body. He just thrashes until it falls off of himself. And his relationship with the coat is so, I don't know, I love it. It's so good. Everything Ted Levine does in this movie is amazing.
Well, here's the thing. Ted Levine as an actor across his career makes exclusively good choices.
I guess I'm only familiar with him as Buffalo Bill, and Buffalo Bill is, it's a good thing in a good movie. But I've never sought out other Ted Levine, and everyone in this movie is at 120% top to bottom.
Well, the thing about Ted Levine is that he shows up in small parts in different places, and you're always excited to see him, but they're always parts that can't compete with the image of Buffalo Bill in your head. This is the first time I've ever found something that uses him to an even larger extent than Silence of the Lambs did. Because Silence of the Lambs had a very specific use for him, and he made tons of good choices within that, but it's a small part.
Yes.
It's a small part with a huge impact.
Yeah.
This is, that's why I said he's like this quasi action hero leading man in this film, and he gets to do so much and nobody is toning him down. Nobody is saying like, oh no, we need to smooth you out, we need to make you more of a normal hero. Tobe Hooper's like, no, give me all the Levine you got. Yeah. I'm giving you all the Hooper I got. Let's just do it. Everybody's to the max.
Hooper fully understands the tone of the story he's adapting and makes the movie correctly.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, though, because that is a minority opinion, for sure. I actually don't even know that we've gotten a clear take from Victoria as to how much she enjoyed this film or not, and I'm curious to know it, because we're sitting here being like, blah, we're big weirdos who like these dumb things, and I don't know if maybe Victoria's sitting here being like, guys, the movie wasn't.
You can say you hate it, no one will be mad.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
I definitely don't hate it. I loved everything with Ted Levine. I just, like I said, I think there was a solid 30 minutes that could have been cut out, and I would have been perfectly comfortable with it, because definitely by the end, I was not excited to go into the big fight scene until Robert Englund got smoothed by the Mangler. I was just like, this is fine, this is great, but I'm tired of it.
So that I can understand as a reasonable objection, and I think that we probably, if the three of us sat down with this movie, we probably could make a better edit.
Well, and I can tell you the thing that and this is maybe for different reasons than you have. But for me, I'm super into practical and not digital effects.
Yeah.
And this is
Yes.
another movie on that cusp where the digital stuff is bad. And I think Hooper is so smart about limiting that digital stuff to basically just when the Mangler is running, and then occasional details. And even when it's happening, it's mostly in darkness. And so it's clearly goofy 1995 CGI or whatever, but it's mostly just hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also don't need that sequence where it breaks free. I could deal with this movie. You would have to put something else between their final showdown and Sherry taking over the factory, but I could deal with this movie without
I don't
without
even
the machine
need
ever
Sherry
running
taking
around.
over the factory. Like that
Sure.
to me,
Yeah.
it's like it's a fine note, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
I knew it was gonna go that way as soon as he let
Yeah,
the
of
doctor
course.
with without a
Right.
finger take her. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
okay,
You
it's just
could
kind
see
of
that
pro
in the
forma
movie.
from there. I could just we
Yeah.
could just deal with all of that. That's fine.
I would. There was nothing until that point that I didn't love, but I agree with you from there on out.
But
I think
my
I
only
agree.
point is that
Tell me
is
if
a qualified criticism, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of things to like in this movie, and then I would make XYZ changes, and we've done that.
Of
We even
course.
did that with like we gushed over
Everything.
Graveyard Shift and how much we loved that, and then
Yeah.
when we were like, how would we fix this? We will completely restructure it. It's
Yeah,
like
we pitched
still love
4
the movie,
different movies that
but
are
we will
related at all, yeah.
we'll like move this to there, and we'll change who the main character is, and we'll like whatever. So that's all fine. That's like an act of love. That's you're in sympathy with the movie, and you just want it to be better.
Yeah.
I have been doing in preparation for our final episode where we're gonna. I'm not sure exactly what we're gonna do, but we're gonna do some sort of larger, like metatextual look at everything, like taking a look at how these movies stack up against
like we
each
do
other.
for the first 15 minutes of every episode.
No, but not about Stephen
Oh.
King, about us, and
okay.
about these movies.
That sounds really
and
introspective.
how these movies stack up to one another, and where we come down finally on some of our theses.
Our feces, Jason?
Our theses that we throw back and forth at each other.
Yeah. Like it's-
I went through and I one of the things I've done is I've gotten a full ranking of all of the movies that we're doing based on
from
IMDb.
someone else? Oh.
Based on IMDb user ratings. So
I don't trust those people.
Well, I don't trust them either, except that I trust them to represent what people
To be the populace.
who think they like movies
Yeah, that's fair.
believe.
Would you say that IMDb rankings are more reflective of the general populace or of self-styled cinephiles?
I would say of people of self-styled cinephiles.
Okay. Which is all cinephiles. I don't know why I was being redundant. Anyone who's
parent,
cinephile
because
is
there's also
self-styled.
a
No
You're
one is
trying to,
ordained.
you're casting a little shade on them. That's all.
There is a parental subset of IMDb where they will give parental warnings
Oh,
that are
right. That's true.
phenomenal.
I've read those before. For
If
sure.
I ever
Yeah.
want to get really excited about a movie, like I went to see Midsummer and I looked at the parental reviews because,
You're like, what is the Christian Science Monitor mad about?
great. Like, oh, good, that'll be exciting, and so on and so forth. They're very explicit about everything that will happen in the film. So
That's useful.
yeah,
So I'll put it this way. I think that the IMDb user ratings are reflective not of the general populace, like, as a whole, of the whole, like, movie-going public, but of it. They're not quite your more narrow cinephile people.
It's more Joker fans than Thor Ragnarok fans.
No, I think it's the opposite. It's probably
Oh,
Thor
okay.
Ragnarok fans than Joker fans. But
Okay.
what it is it's all people who really like movies as opposed to just sometimes go to the movies.
Okay.
So it's not representative of like the entire American public, but it's a representative of the mainstream of people who care enough about movies to put user ratings online. So anyway, I just thought this was probably the best way to just get a snapshot of what in general people kind of think about these movies.
Sure.
where is the Mangler on this list?
So we have a list of 35 movies because we're dumb, and on some days we've done more than one movie. Where do you... I know where the Mangler
Top 5.
ranks
I said
for
that up
you.
top. Yeah.
Where do you think it would rank on IMDb's list?
I would guess middle.
31. I'm going to say 31 out of 35.
That's a
I guess I don't
strong
know what
guess.
else is on the list, but
34
Whoa!
out of 35.
Wow.
The only film below it is The Devil's Gift.
I am not familiar with that.
Which is
Which-
Cheap cinema.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd go into it, but I'll
I
just
would put
send
that
you
at
the
the bottom
episode
end
we
of
did
my
on
list.
it.
I'll listen
Yeah.
I'll listen to your podcast.
they're right that is in the bottom tier.
Yeah, we'll figure out
They're
what our list maybe is later, but that is where the Mangler lives.
That's insane.
It's not 100% like all the way at the bottom of King adaptations for most people.
It was very poorly received when it came out, though, as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think Stephen King films are super weird. Like, there's a certain amount of prestige just by slapping Stephen King's name on it. You guys cover The Lawnmower Man?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, just putting the Stephen King name on it, I think people expect something, and then I think with this, maybe they just didn't know what they were getting into. I'm not sure how to analyze.
This feels like such a Stephen King-y Stephen King movie, though, to me.
I think people want like
of them now.
prestige Stephen King, and then they get this, which is a
but they want
down
misery.
and dirty, like
Victoria,
slasher laundry.
There are 3 to 5 prestige Stephen King movies.
Sure, but I think people want them. I think people like have this idea when they're like, or at least they did in like the heyday.
I think they're all going to be
movie.
the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. I think they do. I think they're like, well, if it's Stephen King, it's going to be. And I don't think they were expecting like this kind of gritty, disgusting, messy film. Which those are all lovely adjectives, like please.
Yeah.
But
this movie is completely off the rails. Like, it's nuts. And so this is where I turn around and say, Jim, even though I completely agree with you that this movie's beautiful and one of the best movies that we've watched, there was not a moment during watching it that I didn't see exactly how much most people would hate this movie.
This is maybe just a point of confusion for me generally, though. Is that
it is? No, that's why I'm bringing it back up.
Is that
this is a recurring theme?
All of the Stephen King movies we've watched that have been good have been pretty bonkers, and it seems like a hallmark of Stephen King that all of his stuff is pretty bonkers. And so it's weird to me then for people to be upset or disappointed when that's what they're getting, because that's kind of what you're signing up for.
They're bonkers
there's
in terms of
fundamental craziness to all of his stuff.
They're bonkers in terms of plot, but not in terms of style. And that's actually what I want to get to before we. I mean, we're already running long, but because this movie is just so full. Yeah. This movie stylistically it's pitched at this incredible height. Of just absolute total, like, everything in the laundry facility is so ornately art directed. It's like if Tim Burton actually made dark movies as opposed to Tim Burton movies.
Yeah.
It's
like if after Batman Returns he had become an adult.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like everything is this like really intensely sculpted and crafted environment that we're saying is slimy and weird and dark, but it also is so clearly built and artificial and created that it's almost, I mean, you mentioned how the foreman has white paint in his hair like he's made up for a stage, and it feels almost like a theatrical production at times. Yeah. Because you're very much, maybe it's just a function of how big the Mangler is, that there's a limit to how many angles you can do with that construction. Sure. But it almost does feel like there's some sort of proscenium arch, or at least like 75% of one going on, especially with the catwalk that they're walking back and forth on. And then when you add in the sound work, where there's constantly sounds of things going, and also
it's 100% ADR.
It's 100% ADR. This is where we bring Popeye back into it, as I promised we would. Everyone is mumbling all the time to themselves. At first I thought it was just supposed to be Robert Englund's character, but then Ted Levine does it, and his brother-in-law does it, and that's that's where I was confused at first in not liking the brother-in-law, is that I was thinking, well, this is a movie where they're having people really do a lot of improv with their lines, because there's no other way to get that kind of constant stream of consciousness than to have actors be spouting that back and forth against each other, and that guy's line delivery just didn't feel sort of authentically organic in the way that somebody like Levine or Englund can, because of who they are. It was because I hadn't totally gotten to the realization that no, this is what this movie is positing this world is like, is that everybody is moving through this space just spouting things, and just like everything comes out and everything bubbles over and everything, everybody comes in from the side. JJ Pictureman just shows up whenever you think that he's not supposed to.
Jason, JJ
Pictureman. Sorry, no, JJ Pictureman. Don't forget the third J. That's his business card. So anyway, so this style is so weird and suffocating and off-putting that I 100%, any normal audience sitting down within 5 minutes would be like, what am I watching? It'd be like people going to see a Terry Gilliam film. People don't generally like Terry Gilliam films.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Are they not
His
well
most
received?
popular movie is 12 Monkeys, and that's because it's the least like a Terry Gilliam film.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that.
I know you don't. That's why I bring it up, because it's fun to talk to you about.
People don't,
because
they
you're
just
a
don't
wonderful
like style?
No, people don't. No, people like things that.
Because here's the other. This is the
that
thing I was going to say
indicate
before you
style.
started this whole train, which is that it's weird to me that people would rank it so low just on account of. I feel like so many of these movies that we've watched have been. I say this a little hesitantly, but like low production value. They've seemed cheap. They've seemed underfunded for what they're trying to do. A few of them very, like the one that is worse than this, whatever, the Devil's Monkey, is terrible, right? It's very cheap. Not terrible, it's just very cheap. And this movie feels like it's made with a budget, and it feels like it's made very competently, and I feel like even if you don't like what it's doing, I can't imagine how you wouldn't respect that it's being made by a group of professionals who are doing a very good job putting together a thing with strong production values.
I think that's
Well,
not
I guess
enough
if
for a
you
lot of
hate
people.
those production values.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria.
But I think that would put it at like at least 28, you know?
The thing that you always miss, Jim, and it's the thing that I love about you, because you're this amazing. You're like an innocent abroad. You have the way your brain is shaped, and it's the reason your movies are so good is because you see things in a certain way, and then you don't have all of the baggage of how like society tells you to see them. But when people come into a movie like this, they don't see competent style put forth. They see somebody who doesn't know how to make a movie that looks like other movies.
That's
and so
crazy.
they see a movie that is badly made.
That's completely insane. This is
I don't know if Victoria will
masterwork.
back me up on that or not.
I think that's accurate, because I imagine if I went to this film when it came out as an adult person and not a creepy child, I would expect, you start out with one particular thing and one particular feeling, and then there's just a hard tonal shift, and then it's kind of going back and forth in different places, different kind of styles. And I think that's really hard to kind of stick with if you want just a straightforward kind of like slasher flick or whatever. This is not that.
No, it's
if you want a
definitely
cop
not
movie,
that.
this is not that. And so I
But
think
it
it's kind of
also-
hard to place and then kind of accept that as doing its own.
I understand that like A Nightmare on Elm Street's whole business is being weird because it's using dream logic, but this doesn't seem like it's being weirder than that. And people love that, and that's Robert Englund.
It's
This
stylistic.
This
No,
movie,
but here's
Jason,
the
is
thing.
so well made that it makes me want to punch Tobe Hooper in the face and take his teeth and put them in a jar that I can wear around my neck.
Well,
It's,
it would be easy to do because he's a corpse.
yeah.
So you just have to find him.
I would have to dig him up and then punch his
I'm
teeth
sure
out.
someone has done
But-
this already.
Punched his teeth.
Still in his
No,
teeth?
taking his teeth. The teeth are
Yeah,
gone.
you think so?
Oh yeah.
I think I can get them on Etsy?
I guess
'Cause
if
I'll just pay
anybody,
money for them.
I guess if anybody was really begging to be dug up and turned into a corpse sculpture, it was Tobe Hooper.
Right. Yeah.
So here's the thing, Jim. It's absolutely beautifully well made. But
Yeah.
and this is what I mean by you are free in large part. You are free of these dictates on your consciousness that sort of like we normal people like Victoria and I we have to struggle with whenever we go into a movie. We have all
dislike
of
this
these
distinction.
these social voices telling us what things are supposed to be. Nightmare on Elm Street contains its bonkersness, right? It makes
To
a
just when
point
it's
of
in
saying,
dreams or whatever?
right? It makes a point of saying like this is a dream, therefore things get bonkers, and when things aren't bonkers, they're normal, and you have a normal quote normal way of presenting reality, and then you move into the dream space, and so you get licensed to be bonkers. But if you are being a genuine artist and just trying to create a world that is the way that you see the world as it's supposed to be, people don't know where to stop. They don't have that certainty. They don't have that reassurance of like, well, wait, where's normal and where does this start and where does it stop and what am I supposed to feel? People want to know what they're supposed to feel.
You don't think people can watch the first 10 minutes of a movie and figure out what's normal from that?
Nope.
Within that movie's world? That seems so easy to
Absolutely
do.
not.
That just sounds like people don't go into movies with faith in their hearts.
I think that's probably
Well,
true.
I don't mean like God
probably
faith. I mean like
Sure.
filmmaker faith.
No.
Faith
yeah.
of the
no,
Mangler.
Yeah.
No, I don't. And maybe I'm being unfair to my fellow man, but I'm looking at this list. I'm looking at this list,
How
Jim.
else could it rank so low?
Yeah. And I just, this is something we've talked about on our regular
That's so
podcast
insane.
at length, and something that Victoria and I have definitely experienced in our work teaching and dealing with like film students even who should know better. They come in and they think they know how things are supposed to work, and so if things deviate from that, their first assumption is this is wrong. Their first assumption is to try to fit it into the schema they already have in their heads, as opposed to allow the work to reform them. Sorry, I didn't mean to get on such a soapbox there, but
it's all right. You're allowed to say
you love your soapbox.
I do feel like Victoria
Beautiful
has talked for 3.5 minutes total. And
oh no, I gave the horrible rundown of everything
we made her recap the whole movie. Are you
You
kidding?
did give the rundown. It was a good rundown.
We've been more cruel to her than any other guest. We made her give the whole rundown.
Have you used the restroom? This might be a personal question since watching the film.
Are you a pervert? Does it matter?
It is irrelevant.
I indeed have used the restroom.
Jim, why are you asking
in the dark,
that? Are you a
and
pervert?
it was fine. I have not been eaten by the Mangler.
Okay.
My childhood fears have been kind of soothed here.
Well, we should probably wrap this up and let Victoria fly away.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you for having me, I think.
It was so delightful having you. I'm sorry we made you spend 8 minutes summing up this movie and didn't let you talk aside from that.
I had a good time. I'm glad I got to rewatch this. I will have to watch a few more King movies.
All right, we're out. We'll see you all tomorrow night. We're gonna start the last week of movies that I'll ever watch, because I'm not living to see The Sun on November 1st.
I'm gonna, at the end of our final movie, I'm gonna sell my eyeballs on eBay.
I have $1.
They're yours. Never mind. Cancel the eBay auction. I'm selling them to
Rad.
Victoria for $1.
Oh, Victoria, I'm glad you're getting something out of this tonight.
I got some eyeballs, you know?
Hell to the King is a special presentation of the Cinesthesia podcast, produced by Iguana Donald Studios, and distributed by Split Tooth Media. Music by Loyalty Freak. Hell to the King is recorded by deeply stupid men who regret most of the decisions they have ever made.
It is irrelevant if I am a pervert.
Cinesthesia.